Hey everyone, welcome to the Tap into Money World Summit Trailblazers Trek. Today you get the privilege of getting a rare sneak peek at how three very special experts in the field of money and business created a prosperous business that changes lives and how they had to change their own life to make that happen. So like I said, today is just a sneak peek. So be sure to join us again for the in-depth interviews with each of these Trailblazers, plus 10 more, when the Tap into Money World Summit goes live May 1st. So look for the link below this video to get signed up for the intensive and how to grab all the treasures from this adventure by investing in the treasure chest at $200 off the regular price before the summit begins on May 1st. So we're practically giving the treasure chest away at just $97 before the summit starts, because here's the bounty you get when you make this smart investment: the full video and audio of each full expert interview. That means you can listen again to increase your own expertise with money and business while like driving or exercising. You'll get the pot of gold, which is my cliff notes from each interview, and 7 bonus 3 minutes to brilliance, which are quick, easy, and effective tapping audios to help you reveal your innate brilliance. And you get all of Natalie's gold nuggets from the summit to listen to or to read. So the minute the summit begins on May 1st, the price of the treasure chest goes up to $197. So make the smart choice to get it at a mere $97 now, and the link to check that out is below this video. All right, let's meet the Trailblazers. Okay, so first of all, let me introduce to you Brian Wetton. So Brian, by the age of 30, he had received a PhD in computer science from UC Berkeley. He'd raised $20 million for 2 high-tech startups, and he'd become an internationally known academic and speaker. He'd made and lost millions 3 times and burned out twice. So interesting already, right? He'd gone from being the one in high school that the chess team made fun of to seemingly having it all. Yet, he felt miserable. So after an impressive amount of inner work, fast forward to today, Brian delights in doing business in a different, more loving, more purpose-filled way, and in helping others do the same. He specializes in supporting entrepreneurs and executives as they build companies that create both money and meaning. He's the author of both Selling by Giving and the book Yes, Yes, Hell No, the little book for making big decisions, which I can attest is a great book. But what really excites Brian is his family. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Nicole, where they spend much of their time wondering how their daughters can be so cute. Welcome, Brian.
Hi, glad to be here. Thank you for having me on this program.
You're welcome, and we'll be back to you in a minute with a question. Okay, next I want to introduce Eric Lofholm. Eric is a master sales trainer who has taught his proven sales systems to thousands of professionals around the world. Eric began his career as a sales failure. At his first sales job, he was put on quota probation after failing to meet the minimum quota for 2 months in a row. It was at this point that Eric met his sales mentor. And after being professionally trained, Eric achieved his quota and eventually became the top producer in that company. For over 14 years, Eric has been sharing his proven sales-increasing ideas with people all over the world. Eric believed that selling equals service. Eric is the author of How to Sell in the New Economy, How to Master the Science of Goal Setting, and 21 Days to Close More Sales. Welcome, Eric.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here.
Great. And let me introduce to you Lori. So Dr. Lori Layden is an internationally known trauma healing professional. Inspired by her work with orphan genocide survivors in Rwanda, Dr. Layden founded the nonprofit Create Global Healing, CGH, and established Project Light Rwanda, the world's first international youth healing, heart-centered leadership and entrepreneurship program based on EFT tapping. Lori partners with Nick Ortner, heading up the Tapping Solution Foundation, supporting trauma healing and resiliency in Newtown, Connecticut, Rwanda, and globally. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you so much, Natalie. What a privilege to be here with you and Brian and Eric. I'm excited to see what unfolds today.
I am too. I'm very excited about this. So, Lori, I'm going to start with you with this question. So, I have a question for each of the three of you. What was one of your biggest personal obstacles in the way of your success, and how did you overcome it?
Well, quite simply, it was overcoming the shame of asking for money. When I was a psychotherapist in private practice, I learned over time to increasingly value the skills and healing space I offered and charge for my services accordingly. Uh, the impetus for starting my nonprofit, Create Global Healing, came when I was invited to Rwanda to offer my trauma healing skills to widow and orphan genocide survivors. It was an invitation that sung to my soul on the deepest level, but having just moved to California from the East Coast, recovering from my divorce and a market crash, building a spiritual growth practice, I didn't have the means to fund the trip myself. Someone suggested I speak from my heart in an email and ask family and friends to help me. Wow, did that push my buttons. All the judgments about receiving, being obligated to others, what would be expected of me, was I worthy enough, shame that I should have the money at this age to fulfill my dreams. And so I did the hard work of looking at all the judgments I had and opening to forgiveness of myself and the circumstance I found myself in. And when I did that, when I opened to forgiveness and I opened to these judgments and releasing those judgments, I came to a much more heart-centered place, and I allowed myself to start to dream. And these waves of gratitude, love, joy, and wonder came about the possibility of what could unfold if I actually was able to make this trip. Something shifted inside of me, and when I wondered where the money would come from, I started to see hearts light up. And I spoke from my heart, I put out the email, and lo and behold, it rained miracles for 100 days. I far surpassed my goal, and most importantly, I learned this huge lesson, which was that I experienced the joy that others felt from being invited on the journey and for supporting me as their representative in this work that they believed in but they personally were not able to do. So it created this infinity circuit of giving and receiving, where we were all givers and we were all receivers, and something greater was born. There was a movement of people who supported me in the work, and I could rely on them, and they could rely on me, and that was the beginning of the last 8 years of miracles.
Mm. And I just want to express my gratitude to you, Lori, for healing that and being able to ask for money, because I personally have experienced the great joy of donating to your work. And it really felt like a great privilege to be able to support you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Thank you.
Okay, so let's go to you, Eric. So what was one of your biggest personal obstacles in the way of your success, and how did you overcome it?
Well, back in 2003, I had a staff of 20 people working for me. I was on track for my first $1 million year. Everything's going great, and the wheels fell off. And that's a story much longer than what we have time for. But I ended up either they quit, my staff, or I had to let them go, and I lost 19 of my 20 staff within 30 days. And so literally my business was on life support. And there was a lot of different feelings that I was going through, feelings of betrayal, feelings of humiliation, embarrassment, etc. And I found myself in a situation where I was really in a victim place of I was the victim for what had happened. And I was faced with a situation of either I shift out of that and take responsibility and focus on what I needed to do to lead myself out of the situation, or I was going to have to wave the white flag and go back and get a job. And it was a very, very painful situation, but I sucked it up, and I learned from that, and I let go of the victim role. and I went into a place of empowerment. And as a result of that, I was able to completely turn my business around and build it up much stronger than what it was prior to that circumstance happening.
Thank you for that. It's boy, sometimes these the dips can be very painful when you're in them, but the result afterward can be so much bigger than you can ever expect, right?
That's right. That's exactly what it was. It was, most of my most painful experiences have been my greatest lessons and gifts that I can now pass on to my clients. So I'm grateful for it, but it was very painful in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. And I believe it's because you had that intention to let it be an empowering experience, because you could have chosen to stay in victim mode and gone back and gotten a job, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was. It really challenged me to grow as a human being, and I'm grateful for. I call it emotional muscle, is what I gained from the experience, and that's something that I'll have for the rest of my life.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so Brian, your turn. What was one of your biggest personal obstacles that was in the way of your success, and how did you overcome it? And
Well,
Lori, you're frozen. I don't know why. You're
Yeah.
frozen right now, Lori. Okay, on to you, Brian.
So I'll do something slightly different, which is I also have a lot of deep failure, painful lessons. So let me just compliment then. Was one of my biggest ones was actually too much success. I joke that the problems all started the third time I became rich. Back in Silicon Valley, I went from having nothing, very sheltered, quiet Midwestern upbringing, to being at the center of the internet revolution in the 90s. And on my 30th birthday, just after my 30th birthday, we went public, and our company was worth $400 million. And like everything I'd been working towards, I surpassed everything I could imagine achieving for the last 15 years. And I started spiraling downhill in depression. And it was actually, I had climbed so high on the ladder of success and found it empty. And that actually led to my second burnout, because once wasn't enough, and led to after a year of depression, actually doing something crazy and desperate and insane, where I actually reached out for help. And didn't just try to figure it out all on my own. I started reaching out to experts in the field of self-help, in psychology, in spiritual psychology. I did this training called Insight Seminars, had a series of wake-up experiences, and all of a sudden I had this first aha of like, oh my goodness, everything I thought that I wanted was out there. It's actually inside of me, behind all of the wound, the pain, the fear, the negativity inside. And so that led to me walking away from a rather lucrative career in Silicon Valley and immersing myself in 6 years of full-time inner personal and spiritual work. And the key lesson for me was I'd been acting like a heroic leader where I had to do everything myself, and discovered how much more powerful I can be and how much easier the game is when I first start with receiving support. And the idea that I could only give as much as I receive was a huge lesson for me.
That's related to Lori's story, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's so interesting that it was that great success that actually led you to that deep depression.
Yep. It all of a sudden I didn't have any excuses to keep me on the overachieving treadmill and addiction I'd been on for so long, and I had some wounds buried away that were coming up for healing that I had to look at finally.
Right, right. Well, and just like all of you, you took that as an opportunity to grow. Instead of taking it as a sign that you were eternally messed up and you were going to stay stuck forever, which is a possibility. That's a choice too.
Absolutely.
Well, Brian, let's go ahead and start with you. So for those of you who are watching, each of our Trailblazers gets 10 minutes today to teach us something. And so what I'm going to do, Brian, is I'm going to set my timer for 9 minutes. And so I'll just give you give you the finger when you have 1 minute left.
That's what you're giving me.
Okay. Go for it.
Well, I just changed gears. I was thinking I was going to teach something different, but I'm going to go with this distinction between heroic leadership and authentic leadership. And I work with so many people who are having a hard time claiming their leadership, playing big enough. I just got on the phone earlier today with someone who has spent the last years training and getting certifications and degrees, and she's so clear on her calling to be a coach in the world, but she's stuck in what I call the spell of smallness. And I find that a lot of times, the more purpose-driven we are, the more conscious we are, the more committed we are to being of service in the world, oftentimes there's this deep stuckness that happens. Now, I know you've had some of those experiences along the way. Is that fair to say?
Oh, definitely. I encounter those kind of things regularly. I actually see it as like a road, a signpost on the road indicating that I'm growing. Well, at least that's the way you told me last time I told you I was feeling awful.
Exactly. So much of our conditioning, and this was certainly a lot of what caused a lot of my challenges in my 20s, my overachieving addiction, is this heroic leadership archetype. If you look at all of our stories, our movies, it's starting to change. We're getting a few counterexamples. But the archetype of leadership in our culture is that of the male, masculine dragon slayer who has his armor and he needs to go rescue the princess, but he has to kill the dragon. He has to fight the legion of bad guys. He has to overcome evil in order to walk his path of heroic leadership. And in business in particular, it's all about being strong, not having any weaknesses, not showing vulnerability, having all the answers. You've got to be the smartest person in the room. And it's never about teamwork. It's much less about, it's certainly not about vulnerability. Receiving support is seen as a sign of weakness. And that's what led to my 2 burnouts, was that pattern, that path of leadership. I had this story inside my head that it didn't count if I asked for help. Like somehow every achievement was a measure of my self-worth. It wasn't so much about was I making a difference, was I providing value. It was, am I good enough? 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 And I was like, I kept making the game harder and harder and harder just to try to prove that I was worthy. Okay, which was a little crazy. So with the new world and the new life I'm in now, in a typical month, I receive support from 4 to 8 coaches, counselors, and healers. I'm married to one of the best coaches on the planet. My wife is extraordinary. Our daughters, 1 and 4 years old that they are already 2 of the brightest lights I've ever seen. I'm clear that they're here as master teachers for me to be receiving from as we grow. If I have anything to teach them, that'll just be astonishing to me. And so it's this core shift from I've got to do it myself. I've got to just give. Like in the healer communities, it's all about giving and not receiving, right? And so instead, really getting that we can only give as much as we receive. In fact, I talk a lot about the ladder of consciousness. I do a lot of work around, there's both the ladder of success, which is what I was climbing in Silicon Valley in my overachieving days, and then there's the ladder of consciousness, where fear is at the bottom and love is at the top, or enlightenment, or however you describe it. There's a lot of different ways of describing that path up. One of my favorite ways is 4 stages of consciousness, and the lowest stage is taking. Okay, which is how we start out as children. And that's what we're always afraid of. I don't want to be a taker. Oh, heaven forbid that I'm taking more than I'm giving. It's like one of the worst things you can call someone. Oh, you're selfish. You're a taker. Okay, because it's a very childlike, childish form of consciousness. So with our daughters, they're good takers. That's their job. Our 1-year-old, she's supposed to take right now. That's her primary thing that she's supposed to be mastering. Okay, but then the next level up is achieving. And that was me, particularly in my teenage years and my 20s, went into manic overachieving mode, and it became a bit of an addiction after a point. And it's an extremely important stage. We need to learn how to achieve, how to stand on our own 2 feet, how to meet the world in its own terms. And that's where the heroic leadership archetype comes from, is from this achieving stage. That the archetype is the hero who achieves. In the face of great obstacles, the hero overcomes and achieves the goal. Okay? And it's a stage. The 3rd stage then is giving, right? And like my wife is a complete archetype of giving in relationship with her daughter. She gives, they receive. They take, let's actually be clear. And they give back in other ways, but they drain her in many ways. They drain me, but not as much, because I don't spend as much time with them as she does. and it's filling, and it's wonderful, and it's a conscious choice, and it's noble, and it's incredible. My wife is one of the best givers I've ever met on the planet, and we're really clear that after 5 years of being in full-time mommy mode, it's time for her to get her cup filled again. And we're putting a lot more energy now in how does she receive support? How does she get her cup filled so she's not just giving, giving, giving? And that's the fourth stage of consciousness, which is actually receiving. And it sounds bizarre oftentimes because we're trained that taking is so primitive, and there's a huge world of difference between taking and receiving. And receiving is receiving from source, receiving from spirit, receiving from those around us, receiving from our universe, receiving intuition, receiving money. Not as a wishful thinking. It's not a spiritual bypassy, oh, let me sit here and meditate and watch The Secret 27 more times and hope that I win the lottery. It's not that. But like the last 5 years, my most challenging spiritual work has been opening my heart to receive the love that I have in my life. And if you meet my wife and daughters, you'll understand what an extraordinary challenge that has been for me. That my wife, came along and in the face of some fairly deep abandonment fears and issues I had from childhood, cracked my heart open. And she's literally one of the most giving people I've ever met on earth. And so it's like, okay, I think I can handle this. Okay, honey, no more. I can handle just that much love. Okay, I can receive that much. And then we had a baby, and Annabelle just screwed my whole world up and cracked my heart open to the next level. And it's like, oh my goodness, I've got to receive that much more love. I was like, okay, I just, it took me about 2 years. I got over the hump. Okay, I got the wife. I got Annabelle. I can receive this much love. It's okay. Then we had another one, and Leilana just took it to a whole nother level. And she comes up to my door and just knock. She can barely walk, and she wants to know where Daddy is. Dad, right? And then also receiving abundance at the same time, and receiving the ability to do service work, and receiving my new book. Yes, hell no, a little book for making big decisions, which is much bigger than me. It wasn't that I wrote this book; I received this book. Yes, I had to do my part. I had to I'm not just a helpless infant. I'm a mature, powerful leader. But the whole point of this is that authentic leadership is about balanced giving and receiving. It's about making sure that we receive and give. It's win-win or no deal. And first and foremost, the first step, there's actually a whole path of 6 essential decisions in order to walk the path of authentic leadership, and it's this upward cycle where we have to do it over and over again. One of them you already mentioned, which is taking ownership, and Eric mentioned, of how do we take ownership of our challenges rather than playing the victim. That's one of the master choice points. But the very first master choice point is, do you try to do it all yourself, or do you start by receiving support? Do you really embrace the truth that authentic leaders can only give as much as we receive? Right? And I know that every time that my challenges come up, every time I start to melt down, all of a sudden I want to go back into, I can do it, as opposed to, hey, honey, how can you help me with this? I just melted down on something. Can you support me in getting to the bottom of what this is about and turning this into a growth opportunity? So that would be the biggest thing, because particularly for any coaches, counselors, healers, transformational leaders, transformational authors on this call, there's something bizarre that happens over and over again for me and so many people I've worked with, where we get in this path and we go from student to teacher role, and we start stepping into our leadership, and then it's like this old heroic leadership archetype comes out of the woodwork and takes us over, and we go from being master students, where we're masters of receiving support, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, now I'm supposed to have the answers. Now I'm supposed to be the hero. Now I'm not supposed to have any problems. Now I can't be vulnerable. I can't be authentic. I've got to have the answers and be credible. And that's the opposite of what we want. And so the biggest invitation I would have for everyone is, if there's any piece of you that's scared of your path, that feels like you're playing small, you're stuck in a spell of smallness, you have this big calling coming through that's much bigger than you, and you feel inadequate of it. That's an on-course indicator. It means you're going the right way. Everyone else in the community does too. You're on mute, Natalie.
I'm unmuted.
There you go.
There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much, Brian. I know that you're giving this training for everyone, but I felt like it was just coming right directly into my heart. So thank you so much. That's beautiful. Okay, Eric, you're on.
Excellent.
I'll give you the finger in 9 minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Well, I want to take a moment and acknowledge everybody that's watching in from all over the world. There's nothing more powerful than a good idea whose time has come. And between our guest experts today, it's possible that one of us is going to share something that's going to really make a difference for you or inspire you to continue on this training that we have coming up that Natalie's put together. And what I talk about is selling, and I actually started off as a sales failure, which was shared in my introduction, so it's kind of ironic that I now teach people all over the world how to be more successful in selling. And what ended up happening is I was about to get fired from my job because I didn't know how to sell, and I met a living master, a gentleman named Donald Moyne, who taught me a system for selling, and within 60 days I became the top producer in that company. And so what it caused for me was this realization that I really believe, unless you're a naturally born sales superstar, that every one of you has potential inside of you to sell at a higher level, influence at a higher level, and so many people struggle with this. I was just talking to a brand new client the other day. She's a consultant, and she's had her practice now for the last 4 years. And she struggled for 4 years, yet she's a brilliant consultant. And she just told me that she's just resisted the entire sales process. And finally, after banging her head against the wall for 4 years, she came to me, and I've been sharing with her, and I'll share some insights with all of you today about some specific things that you can do. I want to share with you a message of hope, and I want you to know that there are real solutions out there that can help you. Selling it's like a combination lock, like a bike lock. If I handed you a bike lock and I said open up the bike lock without the combination, you wouldn't be able to do it. Even if I gave you an incentive like $10,000, open it in the next hour, I'll give you 10 grand. You still wouldn't be. I mean, it's possible, but it's unlikely because it's a lock, you know. And so, but if I give you the combination, it takes one shot, the very first shot, and you can successfully, predictably open up the lock. And you see, selling is like a bike lock in the sense that unless you're a naturally born sales superstar, it's not intuitive to sell successfully, but it's easy. And so opening up a bike lock is not intuitive, but it's easy if you have the combination. And so this is what happened for me once I received training for the first time. My whole world changed. And so I'm a system sales trainer. I have a very methodical, systematic approach, which people enjoy because it's very step-by-step. So I'm going to give you some step-by-step instruction today. I teach 3 key systems to grow any business: lead generation, appointment setting, and lead conversion. So if I was coaching you one-on-one right now, what I would ask you is, what are your lead generation systems? How do you predictably produce leads in your business? And then how do you predictably book appointments with those leads? And then how do you predictably move those appointments into clients? And if you don't have a great, clear answer on how you're generating leads or how you're booking appointments or how you're converting those leads, chances are you're just leaving a lot on the table. And if you're connected to today's hangout here, you're up to big things in the world. You're here, you have a message to share. You're here to make a difference in the lives of others. And it's important to understand from a sales persuasion and influence standpoint, how do you get your message out to the world? Because if you've got this wonderful message, like this consultant client that I just recently started working with, she has this wonderful message to help companies, but if she doesn't have any clients, it doesn't do it any good. And so I love empowering people with these systems. And so I'm going to get right to it and just kind of walk you through a concept around selling. I call it the sales mountain. And it's a metaphor to look at sales like you're a mountain climbing guide, and your job, if you're a mountain climbing guide, is to lead and guide your prospect up the mountain. Well, in sales, when we're persuading and influencing the other person, the concept is we're going to lead and guide them up the sales mountain into what I call the sweet spot. The sweet spot's where the prospect is ready to make a buying decision. So there's a process that we take the prospect through to get them in a place where they're ready to make a buying decision, and just a simple metaphor that you can relate with, whether you're married or not, is there's a process that you go through when you meet somebody and you go out on a date. You go out on another date, and then it evolves into being exclusive, and then you propose, and then you get married. And so there's this process. Well, selling has a process to it, very similar to getting married. And so if you don't know the process, it can be very, very frustrating. But once you know it, it's quite simple. So what I teach as far as the process, it starts with generating a lead, and then step number 2 is to book an appointment. And now you're on the live appointment over the phone or face-to-face. And step number 3 is to build trust and rapport. You're now on the live presentation. And then step 4 is to identify customer needs. Step 5 is to share the benefits. Step 6 is to close. Step 7 is to handle objections. And then if they don't purchase at that point but they're still interested, then we follow up. Now, that's a 4-hour seminar. But what the takeaway for all of you, like a golden nugget you can just pick up right away, is that there's a sequence to delivering an effective presentation. One of the most important words in sales is the word sequence. So what I do and what I teach and what creates breakthroughs and transformation is to prepare your presentation in advance so you know what you're going to say, when you're going to say it, how you're going to say it, why you're going to say it, that you have the sequence down in advance. There's a lot of uncomfortableness that many people have around the ask, asking for the order, asking for the money. And so when we prepare, it eliminates the anxiety. Because if you know exactly what to say, so it goes like this. So let's say I teach a client exactly what to say when they get to the ask. Well, the first time that they're trying the technique out, they're probably going to be a little bit uncomfortable because it's new. Like anything we do new, first time, usually, we feel a little bit uncomfortable. But after you do it, you're like, oh, that wasn't so bad. Okay, so now you do it a second time, and you're going to be much more comfortable than the first time. That logically makes sense to all of you. Intuitively, you know what I'm saying is true. The third time you do it, you're like, I got this. Well, do it 10 times. Do 10 different presentations with 10 different prospects following this process where from the very get-go you were clear on the ask. Well, by the 10th time, you're like, this is a piece of cake. And the shift that can take place, I mean, it's so quick, like snapping your fingers when you get professionally trained. That's how I went from worst to first in 60 days, is because I was shown this, these kinds of concepts. And so when, but they're not intuitive. I struggled for an entire year. I banged my head against the wall. I was threatened to have my job taken away. Eric, selling's not for you. You got one more month or you're out, And I was married at the time, and I didn't tell my wife that I was on quota probation because I was embarrassed by it. I'm like, I might get fired from this job, and having to face her getting fired from my job, and then 60 days later, I'm the top producer in the company, making on track for 6 figures, all because somebody explained it to me. And the thing is, it's really what I'm conveying to all of you is just a message of hope that it starts with intention, and it's about having somebody like me explain the process to you. Once you understand the process, I mean, it's a total game changer. The life I live now is just this extraordinary life where I earn extraordinary living, making a difference in the lives of other people. And we all have our natural gifting. That's why you were drawn to this hangout and to be a part of what we're talking about here, because you know that you have a calling. It's the purpose for your life. And my purpose is in teaching others. It's interesting, although I'm a sales trainer, I view myself as a healer. And I heal people through teaching business systems. And so it's important, though, to have the sales system process knowledge down to get your message out to the world. All right, Natalie, I'll turn it back over to you. And Natalie, I think you may be muted.
Oh, thank you so much.
There you are.
Yeah, I'm just saying thank you for pointing that out because when I was learning the sales process, that's exactly what I was going through. I went through. I think I started at beyond uncomfortable. I was terrified, and then I was, just uncomfortable. But eventually, it became a pleasure, and now it's actually a great pleasure for me to have what's considered a sales conversation because I get to serve. I get to meet another human being, and it's like market research. It's like connecting two people, and so I know exactly what you mean. When you have a system, it can change everything.
That's right.
Yeah. So thank you so much. Okay, Lori, your turn. Lori, you are muted.
Hey.
Got it. We can hear
Can
you
you hear
now.
me?
We can hear you now.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Well, first I want to say how excited I am because I haven't met Brian or Eric before, and yet, Natalie, you have somehow managed to create this amazing synergy because so much of what Brian and Eric has said relates to my message as well. I want to share today what I call my outrageous grace formula. And listeners and viewers may wonder, why is outrageous grace important for business success? And I want to share that with them. 11 years ago, after a near-death experience, I asked to receive a way of helping people heal that was easier and more elegant than what I had been doing in my psychotherapy practice. And in a series of deep meditations, I received what I call the grace process, and have been researching and practicing this approach with individuals and groups and with myself for the past 10 years here in the United States and in Rwanda. It's a spiritual practice for transcending our negative egos and living in and from our hearts. Now, why would this spiritual practice be important for personal and business success? Well, this is a quick lesson, and so let's define some terms first. I want to invite our viewers to think about when they may have experienced grace in their lives. And I will just say that my definition of grace is not related to any religion, but it's a transcendent state of remembering our oneness and our connectedness. And it happens in nature. It happens in shared moments with others. It happens in deep personal senses of connection with ourselves. And yet, what have we learned about grace? We've learned that it is something that we have no control over, how or when we'll receive it. And many of you, like me, will remember that you may have experienced grace in the dark night of the soul, in times of great physical pain, in times of deep silence and prayer and meditation. And yet we never know. It's with great uncertainty when that grace will drop in. There's a second way that we experience grace, which is when we are in these states of what I call gratitude, love, joy, and wonder. And in those places, it feels like grace drops in instantaneously. Well, what is the common thread? The common thread, I think, in the former and the latter is it's when our negative egos drop away. It's when we are either in the former state exhausted and have no ability to control or try to control or effort to control our circumstances anymore, versus that second state where literally in those beautiful heart states we can receive grace instantaneously. And so the question, of course, is, do we want to do it? Do we want to experience grace hanging out in the dark night of the soul, or do we want to do it in those beautiful heart spaces? And my meditations have shown me just how powerful being in gratitude, love, joy, and wonder is. So let's just define negative ego is that part of us that puts that veil of separation from the divine in place, that keeps that illusion that separation is our condition. And yet the heart resonance is that place where we remember our connectedness. And so I went in search of how this formula could be true. And I'm going to share that formula with you after we define some of these terms. But many of you might know the work of heart math, the work of David Hawkins, Discovery of the Presence of God, Joseph Chilton Pearce, The Biology of Transcendence. These are all proving that the heart is not just a pump, but the heart may actually be the functional organ in the brain, in the body, that connects us to the divine. And so what we know about the heart is that it has 60% of the heart cells are neuronal cells. These are brain cells. The heart produces a hormone called ANF that actually influences the function of the immune system, as well as triggering the prefrontal cortex, which is the seat of our inner wisdom, our sense of transcendency, our sense of intuition and creativity. And so when we are in these states of gratitude, love, joy, and wonder, we experience that it's much more possible to harness the energy of grace and to experience these states of grace. And so I know that's really a quick explanation, but I want to move into the formula. And Natalie, I hope you'll be excited by my graphic. I hope it can be seen
That's
on our
gorgeous.
screen.
That's gorgeous. That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So I'm just going to leave it there for a bit for people to be able to write this down. But basically the grace process is a formula that begins with C, which is choice. What are we choosing to heal or receive? And then we look at all the negative judgments we have about that healing we require or are asking for. Then we look at what forgiveness is needed of ourselves, other people, and the divine. And we also then look at how we can touch into states of gratitude, love, joy, and wonder to receive that healing that we are seeking. So it looks like an easy formula, however, not so easy to achieve, but I hope that our viewers will take that to heart and spend some time exploring that. What I want them to be aware of is in those places of judgment and lack of forgiveness, this is where the ego resides. This is the contraction place that keeps us from achieving our success and our fulfillment. And when we're able to deal with and release those judgments and achieve forgiveness, we are then in a position to move into our heart and achieve these higher harmonic states of resonance, which involve this evolution from gratitude that gives rise to love, that gives rise to joy and wonder. And in those places, this is where we can receive grace instantaneously. And there's a very easy way to figure out whether we're in our ego or in our hearts. When we're in our ego, we feel contracted, our breathing is contracted, and our bodies are contracted. When we're in places of our heart is expanded, our bodies is expanded, our breathing is expanded, and in those places we are able to download what it is we need for inspiration. And one of the most powerful examples I can give you is that every time I come back from Rwanda, and it's been since 2007, my heart doesn't break. It breaks open to what is possible because of living in this formula. And because of practicing this formula, I come back and my heart is full of how can we evolve into the next level of global healing. And when I'm in self-doubt and when I'm in fear about what is the next thing that's going to come through, I practice this formula's active work of being in the heart. And each time I do that, I receive a greater vision for what's possible. And that's exactly what happened with our Project Light Rwanda project, which has so filled my heart. And so in those places where I wondered, how can we nurture our next generation of young people to create global healing, I received, or I was the conduit for Project Light. And Project Light is the world's first international youth healing, heart-centered leadership, and economic sustainability program for traumatized young people. And our vision is to take that around the world. And we established that in 2011 with the help of my partner, Nick Ortner, who I've had the privilege to partner with these last few years. And now we have a global vision and a global template for what's possible. None of that could have happened in my ego personality. I'm simply a conduit for this when I achieve these states of gratitude, love, joy, and wonder, and when I receive grace, and I open to what is beyond my ability to vision and dream, and it's happening now. And I don't know what the next step is, but when I get into that fear place again, or I get into that self-doubt place, I know that this will come through for me. And my invitation to our viewers is to do the very same, to allow yourself to be a conduit for what is your destiny beyond what you can know personally.
Lori, thank you so much. Lori, can you mute your... Can you mute me? So I'm echoing. I think it's coming through your computer. Can you turn your computer audio off? Yeah. Okay, good.
I'm muted.
Not echoing now. Thank you. Somehow I heard you say that, so I don't know what. Anyway, yeah. Thank you, all of you. This is so beautiful. And Lori, I just love the way you actually brought together what Brian and Eric had been teaching. And I want everyone watching and listening to this to know that you can get much more in-depth information about the work of each speaker in the whole Tap into Money World Summit. We start on May 1st, and you will be able to connect with all three of these speakers in more depth, and you can get a free gift from them and learn how you can participate in their work more deeply. So thank you, all of you, so much for watching. Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Lori, for participating today. And thank you, everyone who has been watching and learning from these wonderful experts. Can't wait to join you in the full Tap into Money World Summit May 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And blessings to everyone. We'll talk soon.